As a motorboat speeds along the Illinois River, the water suddenly explodes like a shower of silver. Thousands of Asian carp leap into the air, hitting the boat, the nets, even the driver. But the real danger is not the jumping. In many parts of the Mississippi River system, Asian carp now make up 80 to 90% of the total fish biomass, nearly taking over the ecosystem. They consume plankton, the foundation of the freshwater food chain, causing native fish that once supported generations of fishermen to disappear rapidly. Since 2009, the U.S. has spent over $600 million just to stop them from moving a few hundred meters closer to the Great Lakes, where a $7 billion fishery is at risk. Yet surprisingly, this same fish that is troubling the United States has been one of China's most important food sources for more than 2,000 years. So how did a natural biological water filter become an ecological nightmare in North America's largest river system? Few people know that Asian carp did not appear in American rivers naturally. They were introduced by humans to solve a problem. After World War II, U.S. agriculture expanded at an unprecedented speed. Chemical fertilizers were used more and more to increase production, livestock farms grew rapidly, and urban wastewater flowed into inland rivers and lakes on a much larger scale. In just 2 decades, nitrogen fertilizer use in the United States increased nearly 6 times between 1960 and 1980, bringing huge amounts of phosphorus into natural waters and triggering widespread eutrophication. In Lake Erie, one of North America's most important freshwater lakes, the water turned green and cloudy, oxygen levels dropped sharply, and fish died in large numbers. By the late 1960s, the lake was widely called a shocking name across the country, the Dead Lake. Similar problems quickly spread southward. In Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama, catfish ponds were repeatedly covered by algae, reducing production by 30 to 50% in some seasons, and causing losses of tens of millions of dollars each year. In this situation, fisheries engineers found what seemed like a perfect solution across the Pacific. From the early 1960s to the early 1970s, thousands of silver carp, bighead carp, and grass carp were imported into the United States. These species could consume plankton equal to up to 40% of their body weight each day and clear aquatic vegetation that was choking many ponds. At that time, this truly looked like a perfect solution. Everything worked as planned during the first decade. Asian carp helped control algae, improve water quality, and stabilize many catfish ponds across the southern United States. But the turning point came when nature intervened. In 1973, 1982, and especially 1993, the Mississippi River Basin was hit by unusually large floods. The Great Flood of 1993 caused about $15 billion in damage, submerged thousands of square kilometers of farmland, and broke levee systems protecting fish ponds, research facilities, and wastewater treatment areas. In just one flood season, millions of fish escaped into natural river systems. The Mississippi quickly became a biological paradise for them. The river system stretches more than 3,700 kilometers, connects 250 major tributaries, has abundant plankton, and almost no natural predators strong enough to control adult populations. Under these conditions, reproduction increased rapidly. A single female can produce 300,000 to over 1 million eggs each season. The situation became more serious because silver carp feed directly on plankton, the foundation of the freshwater food chain. As this base declined, young fish lost food, native species faced shortages, water birds lost prey, and biodiversity began collapsing in a domino effect. The consequences soon became clear. In many sections of the Illinois River, these invasive fish now make up to 90% of the total fish biomass, almost completely reshaping ecosystems that once supported generations of American fishermen. However, the Mississippi River is still not the final limit of this invasion. The real destination lies farther north. The Great Lakes, which support the largest freshwater fishery industry in the United States. If Asian carp enter Lake Michigan, The entire ecosystem of the world's largest freshwater lake system could be disrupted in ways that are almost impossible to reverse. Because of this risk, a multi-layer defense system has been established along the waterway connecting the Mississippi River to Lake Michigan. The first line of defense is an underwater electric barrier at the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. This system releases 34 electric pulses per second through electrodes placed about 6 meters below the canal bottom, creating an invisible wall that forces fish to turn back before they can reach Lake Michigan. But one barrier alone is not enough to stop a species that reproduces exponentially. Along several river sections in Illinois, research teams carry out electrofishing surveys to monitor population density. At the same time, the state supports large-scale commercial harvesting almost year-round, removing about 450 to 900 tons of carp each year from inland river systems. However, even this industrial-scale removal still cannot keep up with their reproduction rate. As a result, control efforts have brought only temporary effectiveness. Some measures have even disrupted the natural migration routes of native fish species, further weakening ecosystems already under pressure, right in front of the final defensive line protecting the Great Lakes. The story becomes even more surprising when the fish that has become an ecological nightmare in the United States is actually the foundation of a massive industry in China. In China, carp are not an invasive species. They have been farmed by humans for more than 2,000 years, at least since the Han Dynasty. Over centuries, these fish gradually became part of traditional farming systems, appearing in village ponds, rice fields, and multi-layer integrated aquaculture models, forming one of the oldest freshwater fish farming traditions in the world. Today, that scale has grown into production at an unprecedented level. Each year, China produces about 17 to 20 million tons of carp, accounting for more than 60% of global farmed freshwater fish output and playing a central role in an aquaculture industry worth over $200 billion. But the most important point is not the production volume. In China, carp do not damage the environment because they belong to that environment. They coexist with natural predators, compete for food with native species, and function within a biological balance shaped over millions of years of evolution. In the Yangtze River Basin, the Pearl River Basin, and many parts of northeast China, carp farms stretch across kilometers like vast water fields, where fish farming has continued for generations and gradually developed into a large-scale aquaculture production system built on a traditional ecological foundation. Under standard farming conditions, just 1 hectare of water surface can produce about 2 to 5 tons of fish per year. Today, many cooperatives operate continuous farming areas covering hundreds or even thousands of hectares, turning inland ponds and lakes into large freshwater food production zones comparable to giant outdoor factories. This scale has helped carp become one of the most widely farmed freshwater species in China for centuries. One of the key reasons carp are suitable for farming at such large scales lies in their flexible feeding habits. Unlike many industrial farm fish that depend heavily on high-protein feed made from marine fish, carp mainly consume plankton, aquatic plants, and natural nutrients already available in ponds. In addition, farmers often provide nutritional bran, grain powder, agricultural byproducts, leafy vegetables, duckweed, and locally available plant leaves to support faster growth, while keeping production costs relatively low. In major carp farming regions in China, the harvest period usually happens very quickly. When the nets begin to close, the entire fish population is gradually gathered into a smaller area in the middle of the pond. In just one net pull, the harvest can reach 5 to 20 tons of fish, enough to fill several transport trucks within only a few hours of work. For cooperative-scale farms, this process is repeated continuously across different pond sections throughout the harvest season. As a result, the total annual production in many farming areas can reach thousands of tons, creating a stable supply for regional wholesale seafood markets. Such large production scale helps carp maintain an affordable price for everyday consumption. In China's domestic market, Prices usually range from $2 to $4 per kilogram, making carp one of the most accessible freshwater protein sources. When entering export markets, especially in Southeast Asia, Africa, and parts of Eastern Europe, the value of carp continues to increase depending on demand and processing methods. This has turned a fish that once caused an ecological crisis in the United States into a freshwater product with a steady international trade flow across many regions of the world. Right after leaving the ponds, carp are transported directly to modern processing factories. There, they pass through automatic vibrating conveyors that sort them by weight and length, with the ability to classify tens of thousands of fish per hour, ensuring each batch meets specific processing standards. Early sorting allows the entire production line to run faster and more accurately. Next, high-pressure water jets spray from multiple directions to remove mud, slime, and microorganisms from the surface, bringing the fish to proper hygiene standards before cutting. Within just a few minutes, the entire batch is cleaned evenly. After that, specialized cutting machines process the fish at high speed while keeping the body intact and minimizing meat loss. This step helps standardize the raw material before it enters the filleting line. In the filleting and deboning section, automated blades separate the fish into uniform white meat portions, while deboning equipment removes remaining small bones, producing nearly clean fillet blocks suitable for export. The products are then moved into a rapid freezing system at about minus 35 degrees Celsius to minus 40 degrees Celsius, preserving meat structure. Finally, they are packed and placed in refrigerated containers at minus 18 degrees Celsius, ready for long-distance transport worldwide. But after all the industrial processing stages, the final destination of carp is still the dining table. The fish pieces are lightly fried until the outer skin becomes thin and crispy, then covered with a glossy red sauce that combines the gentle sourness of vinegar, mild sweetness from sugar, and the rich aroma of fried ginger and garlic. When poured over the hot fish, the sauce slowly soaks into the soft white meat, creating a distinctive balance of crispy, tender, sour, sweet that makes the dish especially addictive. In a lighter version, carp is steamed whole with fresh ginger and sliced scallions. The steam cooks the fish slowly, preserving its natural sweetness, while the fragrance of ginger spreads gently into every layer of the soft meat. When a layer of hot oil is poured over the scallions on top, the aroma rises immediately. Simple, yet extremely refined. On colder days, carp often appears in a steaming hot pot with broth made from fish bones and vegetables. The meat stays tender but firm, absorbing the mild sour or slightly spicy flavor of the broth. Eaten together with fresh greens and noodles, it creates a warm, well-balanced meal. A humble dish that can easily become the centerpiece of the entire table. In fact, the United States represents only a small part of the global map of the invasive carp crisis. In Europe, especially in the Danube River Basin and many river systems across Central and Eastern Europe, carp and other non-native carp species have changed riverbed structures by constantly stirring up sediment while searching for food. This increases water turbidity and reduces aquatic vegetation, the foundation of habitat for many native fish species. In some areas, carp populations are so dense that they make up 70 to 90% of the total freshwater fish biomass in lakes and inland canals. In Australia, Asian carp are considered one of the most dangerous invasive species ever introduced into the Murray-Darling River Basin. Today, they account for about 80% of the total fish biomass in many major river sections, seriously damaging native fish habitats and causing ecological losses estimated at hundreds of millions of dollars each year. The Australian government has even studied nationwide biological control plans to limit the rapid spread of this species. The biggest lesson from the invasive carp story is not about the fish itself. Carp did not swim across oceans to appear in distant river systems on their own. Humans brought them there, with goals that were very reasonable at the time: controlling algae, improving aquaculture, and increasing food production. But the problem was not the goal. The problem was that these introduction decisions were made too quickly, too simply, and with little consideration for long-term ecological consequences. When carp escaped into the wild, they were no longer a production tool. They became part of the ecosystem and began changing that ecosystem in ways that humans cannot easily reverse. This shows that in many cases, nature is not what creates the crisis. Human overconfidence and short-term thinking are the real causes. So the carp story is not just a biological issue. It is a clear reminder that every decision to interfere with nature today can become a legacy that future generations will have to deal with. In the end, the story of invasive carp is not just an ecological issue, but a story about how humans respond to the consequences of their own actions. It is the same species of fish, yet in one place it becomes a crisis, while in another it supports a massive production industry. And that difference does not come from nature, it comes from human choices. Sometimes what needs to change is not the ecosystem itself, but the way we understand and manage it. If you want to explore more unusual stories shaping the world around us, don't forget to like and follow the Mandarin Tech channel.